everybody. Today we are continuing our series of Ink Her. This is something that Ink and Herky are doing together, where we'll be interviewing 49 women throughout this month and next. And why 49? Because 49.6% of the world are women. So we wanted to interview 49 women. And so we are really thrilled today to interview Shilo, who is talking to us from her studio in Jaipur. She's an artist, she's a provocateur, she's many things. So instead of giving a long intro, we're just going to dive into our conversation with Shilo. And Shaila, I thought we'll start about, since you're in your studio, we'll start with your art first and what the stuff you're working on. And I want to just say that you're one of those few artists who straddles the world from street artist to fine art. You know, you sell your art to some of the best collectors across the globe, and you travel to all over the world. And then you also do huge murals in 15 plus countries under the Fearless Collective. And you work with the women in those places, everybody from young women to sex workers to all kinds of women. So tell us about what's your, how do you straddle these two worlds? And also, not to mention, you actually created a 40 kg thing, armor called temple, and you wore it when you found out there's an ancestral temple in Kerala where only men could be mediums for goddesses. So you sculpt, you paint, you do murals, and so is art an expression of yourself, or is it a hobby? Way more than a hobby. I don't mean as a hobby. Is it an end in itself, or is it a means to an end? So tell us about you and your relationship with art.
Okay, perfect. So let's begin, as always, with a story, Lakshmi. So
Yes.
they say that at the beginning of the entire universe, actually, before even the gods existed, the goddess exists. And she, Tripura Sundari, with three of her glances in three different directions, was able to birth Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. So, in our traditions, the entire world begins with a woman. And in my life as well, in my own creation story, I grew up, as you know, with my mom, and she was a single mother. She is also a very well-known artist, Shilo Shiv Suleman. And so for me as well, the presence of the goddess, the presence of the feminine has always been a very big part of my own internal landscape.
Mm-hmm.
So now, all these years later, I find myself in Jaipur, which is actually my ancestral homeland as well. Um,
Okay.
if 5 years ago, if you told me that I'd move to Jaipur, I would have been like, no, thank you. Tier two cities in India. I grew up in Bangalore, as you know.
And you have one of the most beautiful homes in Bangalore that you built with your mom.
Absolutely, absolutely. But yet I found myself in ancestral homeland, reclaiming, I guess, parts of my own culture and my own history that I found most of India forgets, right? So I've been here working with artisans. I have a studio inside a 17th century palace in Hawa Mahal, inside the
Yes.
temple courtyard of Hawa Mahal, where it literally, as you're walking down the streets, you turn and you see a palmist, you see a kachori wala, you see a temple, and then you turn into my studio and you're in a different world altogether. So I continue to be full of surprises.
Yeah.
And this studio in Jaipur, they say that like I said, my ancestors on my mom's side were Lohars. And they say that the Lohars were sons of Vishwakarma, and they could, as they would imagine something, it would be instantly manifest into reality. It would become real. And the gods got
Mm.
so jealous of their ability to manifest so quickly that they sent rain clouds. Indra sent rain clouds to destroy the kingdom of Loharpura, which was made out of loha, iron. And with the rain, it all came to dust, and they became into nomadic warriors across the desert. So for me to
Mm.
come back to listen to the stories of the land, to work with the artisans here, has been really important. To be inside the bones of an ancient Haveli has been
Mhm.
a big reclaiming of my own kind of history.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
this has always been something that, as you know, I've been very interested in. How does one make culture contemporary? How does one bring India to the world? This is also why me and you have had
Mhm.
so many synergies
Yes.
for decades
Yeah.
now, basically, since I
Correct. Yeah.
was 16 years old.
Yeah.
But to answer your question, my practice is split in two. On one hand, I am the founder of Fearless, a growing movement of hundreds of artists across South Asia whose work is to turn up at moments of fear and use art as a way of shifting conversations from fear to love. So we've been in crazy places, from some of the most, violent places on the planet to the front lines of resistance movements. Most recently, we were very involved in the Bangladeshi liberation movement, in the protests following the economic crisis in Sri Lanka. We've been very, very involved with the Palestinian movements as well. So, where there's fear, we turn up and we become into a voice for the feminine, for beauty, for hope, for
Hmm.
love, for possibility. And then on the flip side, I have my personal or my private art practice, which is, while fearless, I think really contends with the wounding of the world. Um, my personal art practice is almost imagines what exists beyond the wound. What if we could be unwounded? Like they say that the word for the anahata chakra, the heart chakra, actually translates to unwounded. So I believe that my work in my private art practice is huge magical birds and lotus flowers that beat with your heart, and it's really like expressions of the divine and the sacred beyond any
Hmm.
fetters of reality. So
Yeah.
somehow having both of these spaces activated, dealing with what's real through love and beauty, but also imagining
Hmm.
a magical world that is completely possible and awaits us on the other side, has been very healing for me.
Yeah. One of my favorite memories of you is when we were in Kuchaman Fort, like at night. I still remember it's like the mirrored room where you put rose petals and you read poetry, everybody read poetry. And it's so magical. So there is this side of you that unleashes love and romance and beauty and all that stuff. And then, your Fearless Collective started with Nirbhaya case. It's like really the rawest, the toughest thing. So how do you protect yourself
Mhm.
from all the, and I'm sure when you visit these countries, when you're talking to the women, there are a lot of painful stories and you carry that with you. So how do you protect yourself to keep the romantic side up, the beauty up, and not be, taken down by the ugliness, really, that the violence that surrounds us.
Yeah, so a very dear friend of mine actually calls me Padmapada, which means lotus foot. And she says that when I walk in murky waters, flowers bloom with every step.
Yeah.
And I really love that metaphor because, in a sense, for me, in my early childhood, as you well know, like I was quite familiar with the murky water, right? For
Yeah.
me, my own art practice also began with a moment of fear when my father said he was going for a business trip and pretty much vanished off the face of
Never came
the planet.
back. Yeah.
And at that point, my mom found herself responsible for two kids with no real kind of career that she had. She'd never picked up a paintbrush before in her life, really. And
Yeah.
she began to paint. And, in the beginning, mine and my mother's work was very different from what you see now. It was actually, like I said, the murky water. It was full of
Right.
pain, a lot of abandonment. But the beautiful thing about pain is that it moves. It
Mhm.
leaves, right? So um,
Mhm.
I often say that we shape shifted. We poured out all of the pain from our body until there was nothing left. So during the
Yeah.
day, we would teach art. She would go to different schools. I would help her with art classes in the evenings. And then at night, me and her would just paint because we wanted to, because we needed to. Um,
Yeah.
I often say that beauty saved me because it became into both the emotional backbone as well as the financial backbone of our
Mhm.
family. And at like all of 18, I made my mom her first catalog of paintings, and both of us went to Bombay looking for gallerists. And we went from
Mhm.
one gallery to another, and everyone was like, what are you guys, like the Gilmore Girls of like the art world? Like this
Yeah.
is not how it
There was
works.
no Gilmore Girls in those days.
No,
You were the
yeah,
first Gilmore Girls.
yeah. This is not how it works until one gallerist said yes.
Yeah.
And this is also how I guess our beautiful story comes together because when Sangeeta said yes to my mom, the only other artist that she had was Raghava in Bangalore.
Right. Yeah.
And so Raghava, we then got in touch with Raghava to find out more about how to navigate my mother's first show. And Raghava found my blog of like
Correct.
me at 19 years old, 18 years old, dressing up and making crazy videos of myself and making paintings of strangers that I met in train rides across the country. And he was like, Lakshmi, you have to meet this crazy girl that I
Yes, I
found.
know. I remember. I remember that day so clearly in our office in Indira Nagar. He said, "We have to go meet her. She has to be apply for a fellowship."
Yeah, and
And
then my life changed completely. So,
yeah, yeah,
you are also equally part of this very
yeah,
vibrant creation story and my
yeah.
rising from murky waters into a lotus flower. So yeah.
Yes. And I mean, since you're talking about your mom, let's talk about her a little bit. Obviously, she's been a huge influence. And I really love this story of, I think when you were 4 or something, you baked a cake with olives and chilies and all these kinds of stuff. And she secretly switched it with a strawberry cake, and you thought the magic worked.
Yeah.
And, it's so beautiful. I think she's someone who somehow saved your love for beauty without exposing you to too much of the pain that she was going through and yet sharing it. It's not
Yeah.
like she was stoic.
Yeah.
She shared everything with you, but somehow you both, kept up your positiveness and stuff because it's so easy to go the other way.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about her and your relationship with her.
Absolutely. I mean, so, again, I remember when I was around, I want to say 8 years old, we would open up all of the doors and windows in our house and we would turn off all the lights and we would just wait and wait and wait for fireflies to come into our house from the garden outside. And
Wow.
I have this beautiful, vivid memory of me, my mom, and my little brother sitting on this couch in complete darkness, just waiting for fireflies. And they would come in. And this was actually at a very difficult moment in her life. This was when she was, at the height of a very abusive relationship, didn't really have the vocabulary to be able to articulate what she was going through at that point, but she still had this deep capacity for magic. And I feel like that is really, that's at the heart of everything that I do, whether it's
Yeah,
with Fearless or whether it's in my own personal practice. I do believe that like magic is possible, love is
yeah,
possible. I think that, we often call even our Fearless murals portals because we believe that they're visions of that safe and sacred future that doesn't even exist for a lot of communities. If you're a
mm-hmm.
domestic migrant worker in the streets of Beirut, you do not see yourself as an empowered larger than life monument, but we still
Mm-hmm.
create visions of these communities so we can step into it. But that really comes from my mom because I do believe that we painted a reality of our own and then we stepped into it. Like if you see
Right,
our
yeah,
house or even my studio and my life in Jaipur now, it literally feels like her paintings. So we have
right,
this
yeah,
very beautiful kind of visionary magical realist relationship even with our art, where as we keep painting visions we step into our visions. um,
mm-hmm.
and I actually feel like that's at the core of so many of our even ancient Indian meditative practices is
Mm-hmm.
we do have to, with our mantras, with our meditations, we're able to clear the fear, the distrust, the cynicism, and we are constantly, projecting a vision of what we want so that we can step into it. We realize that very much like the story of the Lohars, right, where
Right, yeah,
hold a vision, it becomes instantly manifest as a reality. So I think it's
mm-hmm.
very important for us to, whether it's with our social justice movements or whether it's in our own personal lives, to hold a vision of what we want rather than what we don't want. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, with my mom, we have a, beautiful relationship, but it's also some of our biggest fights have been about paint. She's like, you
Yeah.
didn't make it yellow ochre, and now it looks really bad. And I'm like, make your own choices about your painting.
Don't tell me what to do.
Yeah, so we've had some really, really, really sort of funny conversations. Recently, also, she came up to me and she's like, Shiloh, I should teach you how to paint. And I'm like, Ma, I know how to paint. And she's like, no, no, I'll teach you how to paint well. So we've had some hilarious. We're really quite yeah. We're like
Yeah.
a sitcom waiting to happen. But she is a dearest inspiration and a powerhouse. And again, a reminder that indeed so many of our worlds are created by women.
Mhm. So, one of the things is there is art and then there's the business of art, right? I
Hmm.
mean, you were, as you were saying, even before you were in high school, you created a catalog for your mom. You were like her business partner even before you started painting yourself. And even now, you have to maintain, if there is a show, then you have to do things on time, you have to send it, there's an income, there is, you have to negotiate, all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
So, how did you train yourself to do both, or do you have help from others? Or tell me about how you, straddle those two roles.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that I'll also definitely give a lot of credit to Inc. for our early years of entrepreneurial training for sure, because
Yeah,
it's nothing like being 18 years old and being thrust into like a global platform, speaking on stage at like DLD and,
yeah.
with, and so I really
At TED Global, at
and
Inc., all those
global,
things.
yeah, with like
Yeah,
Yoko Ono sharing the same stage as me. So I think those
yeah.
early days with Ink really helped formalize and train what was already in me, which is a spark of a kind of entrepreneurial spirit. The thing is that I actually, if you left me alone to say just paint for the rest of your life, I don't think I'd be able to do that because I really enjoy building building things. I really enjoy leading movements. I think that also in a space like India, and this is again, I know a shared passion of ours, is when we were left by the British, we were left firstly like $45 trillion in debt, but also with all of our institutions completely destroyed, right? So everything from the Nalanda University to our, educational platforms, our art institutions, everything was decimated. And so all of us here have had to build up institutions where there were none. So let's say even with Fearless recently, as we got this very exciting $3 million grant, which has now allowed us to become Fearless Foundation for the Arts. I'm now trying to raise 10 million. And
Mhm.
I think it's where there are no institutions to support, we have to build our own. And I think that's what so
Right.
many of us are doing, is that we are building the platforms that we don't have. We don't
Hmm.
have, we don't have Sotheby's, we don't have the Met, we don't have the MoMA. So we have to build up our own foundations, our own institutions.
Hmm.
Um, and I really find that very exciting because I think the role of the artist is not just to dream and create, but actually to build worlds. And
Hmm.
like I've been saying, to shift
Yeah.
realities. So yeah, I think that's a very
Yeah.
important part of me actually is the
Yeah.
side that is interested in finance, that is interested in, building up different organizations and things. I mean, even when we met at 21 years old, it was building out a new media company, right, for kids, which then
Correct. Yeah.
eventually Fearless completely took over. But
Right. Yeah.
it wasn't just I want to make art. It was always I want to build a world. Yeah.
Yeah. And also, I think it shows, one of the things that's necessary in the world is the ability to do everything, to have an interdisciplinary approach, right? You can't just say, an accountant can't say, I'll only do account. They need to appreciate art, they need to
Yeah.
appreciate behavioral economics and all that. And then economists should appreciate art. And, the circle goes on. And, in this future, I think for creativity is really what's going to bind us all together, and we all need to know a little bit of each, which you've been really doing a lot of. And one of the things I also want you to talk a little bit about is that the role of body in your art,
Mhm.
whether it is whether it's this temple you were wearing on your body, or whether you paint, etc. Tell me a little bit about especially the feminine body and the role of body in your art.
Okay, I think that's a beautiful question. So, I mean, again, I think growing up in South Asia, we have to contend with the reality that, like, very often with a lot of women in South Asia, we begin with our bodies not being our own, right? We're always told what we should wear, or even worse, sometimes very much wounded by sexual violence quite early on. And I think that again, looking back at all of the glorious, glorious mythology that I draw so much inspiration from, when we look at the feminine path, it is very much embodied. It always, like, we look at all of the Devi Mahatmya and the Saundarya Lahiri, and it is beautiful, beautiful descriptions of the body, of of everything from like the eyelashes of the divine feminine to the earlobes to the feet. And I feel like growing up in India, we are very often disembodied. We all feel so much shame around our bodies. We feel like we have to hide our bodies. We feel like we are constantly, also, if you're walking around the streets in India, you feel as if you have an invisible armor on all the time. You're always afraid. And that's also, with a lot of the origins of fearless, but also with my own art, it is really what's on the other side of that fear is divinity, is like a beautiful kind of sacredness and a reclaiming of that
Mm-hmm.
sacredness.
Mm-hmm.
um if we look at a lot of, like, I guess, our own spiritual traditions as well, it always looks at the body as an inconvenience, whether it is fasting or whether it is trying to, like, remove oneself from the tethers. I believe that those tethers are all the feminine world. I do believe that, like, while Buddha had to leave his wife and child, I feel like the feminine pathway is actually very different. It's through the world. And
Mm-hmm.
so for
Mm-hmm.
me, embodiment is a big part of my practice, and I think also with embodiment comes healing. So it sort
Mm-hmm.
of comes
Mm-hmm.
hand in hand. And yeah, I
Yeah.
think with temple in particular, as I mentioned, I was brought up by my mom, but at some point in my own healing practice, it felt like it was necessary to go and meet my father as well. And so I went to our native village in Kerala, in Kannur. And it's one of those funny things where I was brought up in a Muslim family by my mom, but I have always, as you know, carried around like ghantis and havans, and people are like, who are you, man? Like, who's going through an
Yeah.
airport with a freaking, security with a havan in their bag? And
Yeah.
going to my family temple in Kerala and meeting my father again, it all made sense, because before him, we've come from an intergenerational line of temple keepers in Kannur. And yeah, so it was really beautiful to realize that actually, it's always in us, like our ancestry is all there. And when I was in Kannur, we've all seen the Thayam performances, which are so glorious and so
Mm-hmm.
beautiful. And they're all channeling Bhagavati, the mother goddess, but they're never
Yeah.
allowed to um, actually, like, women are not allowed to actually perform it themselves. So while I was there, I began to conceptualize this piece, which was then auctioned at Sotheby's in New York, called
Mm-hmm.
Temple, which looked at the body as a temple, and it became, I kind of became the first woman to then channel that
Mm-hmm.
divine feminine force. Yeah.
Yeah. And also, the other thing I want you to talk about is your art was you got a grant from Burning Man actually
Yes.
to
Yeah.
do your Pulse and Bloom there. And you were much younger at that time, and it
Yeah.
was a long time ago. And what was that experience like for you? First of all, tell us a little bit about the piece that you created, and it still travels everywhere and
Yeah, it was
stuff.
just at the pyramids of Giza. I became the first Indian artist to put an artwork in front of the pyramids, and it was, I mean, you could give me any white cube gallery in the world and then give me the pyramids of Giza, and I would choose the pyramids, right? So it was
Yes.
really,
Yeah.
really just so spectacular to place the lotuses as an offering
Mm-hmm.
in front of the pyramids last year. But yeah, that project, again, while Fearless really took up a big part of my life and continues to, simultaneously, I felt like it was very important to continue working with art and technology and continue to keep that practice very alive, because, again, I think in the Indian art scene, we feel like art needs to be static, it needs to be inside gallery spaces. But I do believe, growing up in a city like Bangalore, where it was both a green city as well as a tech city, it became really important to be able to make art that actually spoke to the earth, actually spoke to our bodies. Also, again, in those early ink days, we were
Mm-hmm.
traveling around the world, going to like the US, and for the big fellows road tour that we did. And there was this huge sort of interest in the technology of the quantify itself, and yet I wanted to use the same technology to break down the idea of self completely, to remind each other that we're always connected. So it began as an interdisciplinary sort of uh, project with me, with a neuroscientist, Rohan, with Sabah, an architect, and we really began to think about, we were doing a lot of
And Luke also worked with you guys, I
Luke
think,
as
right?
well, yeah. So there's a
From the
whole
hardware
bunch of us
side.
that worked on that project together, which was really
Yeah.
wonderful. And yeah, we applied for a grant from Burning Man. We got it. And we I went at like 22 years old, went out into the deserts and built these lotus flowers that beat with your heart. And since then, I've worked on a whole series of different biofeedback installations that again,
Tell a little bit more about that, Shiloh. I don't think everybody doesn't know. So tell us how they beat to your
absolutely. So
heart.
we were doing a lot of research about how when people spend enough time with each other, their heart rates actually sync up, kind of like fireflies pulsing in a pattern. And so they say that when you break up with someone, you actually have a broken heart because you've lost the person who your heart was synchronized to. Or they say that when you're in
Oh,
your mother,
interesting. Yeah.
yeah, when you're in your mother's womb, your
Yeah.
heart doesn't beat alone; it learns to beat with your mother's
Beat
heart.
with your mothers. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there are
Yeah.
all of these invisible ways in which our bodies are connected,
Mm-hmm.
and yet we feel so disconnected from each other these
Mm-hmm.
days. So with that, it became into a visual extension of one's heartbeat. So when you put your hand on the flower, it would glow with your heart. The lights would sort of pulse with your heart. But when two people put their hand on the same flower, you could see both heartbeats, and over time, you could see how your heart rates would begin to sync up. I then worked on another installation called Grove, which had breath sensors, which looked at how, every time we exhale, we're inhaling what a tree exhales. So we're in this constant cycle of breath with the forest outside. So it really, with a lot of the work that I continue to do, it looks at how, like it makes the invisible world visible through technology.
Yeah. Yeah. So I want to make sure we take some questions that have been asked. So Shilpa is asking, um, hi ma'am, what does being fearless mean to you in the context of art and activism?
Yeah. Well, I think particularly in the landscapes that we work in, what tends to happen, especially in spaces of decay or breakdown. Let's say when I was working in Liari in Pakistan, this was a neighborhood. First of all, as an Indian artist working in Pakistan, but this was also a neighborhood which was considered the most dangerous neighborhood in all of Karachi. Like when people found out that you were from Liari, they asked you whether they had a gun, you had a gun in their pocket. So um,
Mm,
when working in spaces like this, you realize that because there's fear and taboo associated with those spaces, they are further disenfranchised. They're further cut off from water, from sanitation. And by going back into those spaces and by working with communities to reclaim those spaces, we're actually
mhm.
transforming from fear to love. We're transforming those spaces into spaces of beauty, of reclamation, of hope, of connection. Because like
Yeah,
like we said, the magic is always there. So
right.
um, I think that it's very important for us to not abandon, to not leave behind anyone. No one gets left behind is one of the mantras of fearless. So yeah, I think it is very, very important. And I think also right now, if you see whether it's the wars that we've just witnessed or everything that's happening in the world, they're not just fought with drones
Hmm.
and missiles. They're fought with narratives. They're fought with stories.
Right.
Fear becomes weaponized very often.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
I think it's very important for us to become into a force of beauty and of love.
Yeah,
And of solidarity, to realize that
yeah,
actually not everybody on the border is a terrorist, to realize that not everybody who's queer is going to like convert your child, not everybody is
yeah.
enemy. And very often what happens is that we project our own
Yeah.
unresolved fear and
Hmm.
trauma and pain onto the other, and we create enemies through narratives. And it's important
Yeah.
for us to make lovers instead, to have a universe of friends and friendships. Yeah.
Hmm. So there's one more question about you teach art, you taught art in the past, etc. So how do we expose our children to art? How do we, they may not become artists, but still that art appreciation, that exposure to art. Any ideas about how to inculcate that in our children?
Yeah, absolutely. How, well, I think, first of all, not everybody needs to be an artist. Like,
Right. Yeah, that's what I said. They don't need to be an artist,
yeah,
but
I think,
they should support artists in a
yeah,
way.
for sure. I think everybody needs to listen to their own invisible pulse. And I think that that's often what I think, especially in India right now, it becomes very easy to say you need to be an engineer or a doctor or whatever else. But I feel like allowing people to just be themselves and know themselves very intimately is
Mhm.
the most important thing. And so when there are artists that emerge amongst us, it's
Mhm.
also important to recognize that actually, like, everything is art. It doesn't have to be that you have a gallery practice, but Lakshmi, you write beautiful
Yeah.
letters. Like, you're an artist.
Yeah.
Uh,
Right.
and it may be that somebody else loves cooking food, and that's
Yeah.
also being an artist. So it's
Yeah.
really listening to the pulse of your passion, I believe. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I love that phrase, pulse of your passion.
Mhm.
Marissa is asking, you worked with biofeedback, sensors, and immersive tech in your installations. What excites you or concerns you about technology's role in shaping emotional and political narratives?
Okay, cool. Yeah, I mean, I know that with any wave of technology, there's always, again, a lot of fear that comes up for people. But actually, I think that there's a tremendous opportunity to play and to engage. Whether right now I'm like really, really getting into AI art, and I know that there's a huge debate about that, of course. But I think, in the face of possibility, I'm very excited about seeing how it can actually augment my own art practice. So I'm an
Mhm.
Aquarian. I've always been. Social justice and technology are the two things that Aquarians do really well. And
Yeah.
for me, right now I'm working on this like giant installation that responds to motion sensors, for example. Um, and I find it just so, so, so exciting that we can actually create art that brings alive
Mhm.
even ancient ideas, like it brings
Mhm.
alive, it channels the
Mhm.
lights and constellations of galaxies. It
Yeah.
responds to the motion of wind. Like, for me, the
Mhm.
possibility of using art and technology the way that our ancestors used art and technology is really interesting. And I think
Mhm.
also, when we think about technology, we think about like it being really new age. But if you look at a stepwell, right, the Bowries of Rajasthan, these were
Yeah.
pieces of technology. They were geological,
Right. Yeah.
they were channeling like water in the desert. They were also cultural spaces because this is where community would gather. And
Mhm.
they were like tremendously technologically advanced. Very often they were also made by women, as you can see with the Rani
Mhm.
Ki Vav in Gujarat. And so for
Yeah.
me, or even the pyramids, I was just in Egypt, like I said, and before that I was in Mexico. And
Mm.
there is these are also these are art pieces. So I feel
Mhm.
like, and they're also pieces of technology. So I feel like it's very important for us to be able to build upon the wildest dreams of our ancestors, and
Yeah.
not see it as doing something new or radical, but we have always channeled the technology of our times. And I think the role of the artist is to bring our politics along with us and to bring the earth and our nature along with us as well as we do that. So yeah.
Yeah. No, just want to say that stepwells in general, like when you take the aerial views, they're so, so beautiful. But the
Absolutely.
Rani Ki Vav, the things that you're talking about in Ahmedabad, it's a social space,
Hmm.
it's not just a beautiful, I mean, it's not like a, symmetrical design when you see, but like the way it's built, its social spaces are beautifully built into it. So it's
Hmm.
very interesting. While it started as, storing water, but it's became like maybe it's some women's interference that made it into social spaces around cool water you know
Absolutely.
and it's really good. And so I know you're on a time crunch, so I want to respect. And so I just want to say, Shiba is saying, I love your work. It's just out of the world. And I've been following your work from years. And then we have Marissa who's asking, when it comes to supporting artists,
Hmm.
what can we do? Non-artists, communities, and um, what does meaningful visibility look like for artists working outside the traditional gallery or commercial circuits? What can we do to help
Yeah,
them?
absolutely. So I see Deepti also had an interesting question there. So I'm just going to weave all of those answers in. So
Yeah,
maybe
sure, sure,
to answer
sure.
your question, our process is totally participative. So this, as I mentioned, when I was young and I was in the process of using art to heal myself, I would paint self-portraits, and every time I made a self-portrait, it made me shift from who I was told to be to who I want.
Mm-hmm.
um like I
Right.
said, I painted a world that I could step into. So the fearless methodology, or I have a guest who's chosen to come and say hi. The fearless the
Aw.
fearless methodology works on a very similar um kind of framework, where we work with communities in a completely participative way to determine who they want to see themselves as. And
Mm-hmm.
so they're, in a sense, huge, self-determined self-portraits on the streets that we paint with them. So everything is determined by the community. In the fearless artists just become into karigars, in a
Yeah.
sense, for what the community needs. And it's a very humbling process, especially as an artist, because as artists, our world is like the most precious kind of indulgent thing, right? And so when we actually work though with communities, we have to let go of our words to support them.
Right.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
and with Marissa's question,
Yeah.
how does one work outside of traditional gallery spaces or commercial circuits? I think that's really important. I think we all get, there is a value in a gallery space, because I think it's important for us um, to also create a space where, like I said, our worlds can be honored completely. And yet, I feel like we have to just believe in the visions of what we want, and treat it almost like more like an entrepreneurial initiative and less like an art project. So with Fearless now, over the course of 12 years, we've now even shifted our mandate completely, where it's not just about creating political art or networking political artists, but we're also now resourcing. So we're also a funding body for the creation of political art across borders. And we're also hoping to get into care and protection for artists at risk. So right now, we're in, over the last couple of years, we've found ourselves in really crazy situations where we had to evacuate a family of seven from Afghanistan for one of our artists, Zara Khodadadi, who's an Afghani photographer. During the Taliban takeover, we have another artist from Myanmar who, all this girl did was take sheets of paper out onto the streets and write protest slogans for people, and ended up with a military sentence of 30 years and had to be evacuated out of the country. So we found ourselves in a position where artists face the very real repercussions of their free expression and their individual, kind of freedom, and they don't really have an institutional body to protect them. So Fearless is now also stepping into that space where we're building up a network of human rights lawyers. We're building up a care and protection program for artists, so that artists who are at the front lines of different movements um, have support in moments of need. So many of the greatest artists that we celebrate right now, from Darwish to Faiz Ahmad Faiz to Hussein, all lived in exile. And so it's very important for us to recognize that artists, very often stand against the currents of their time. They believe in a world that doesn't exist yet. And so they also need protection. So that's where we're stepping into right now with Fearless. I can't hear you, Lakshmi. You're on mute. Can't hear you, Lakshmi. Yeah.
Sorry, I was on mute because there's somebody decided to do a lawnmower here.
Oh,
So,
I know
so
LA. I,
yeah, so
I'm, sorry, you were saying?
no, Shilpa is asking, what advice would you give to someone who wants to use art to make a difference but doesn't know how to start?
Start.
Yeah.
That's the first part. You really just need to start. Like, I don't think that there's any excuse or there's any overthinking. I think art is actually the space that exists beyond all of our thinking, right? And
Yeah.
beyond all of our crippling fears, our insecurities. Should I do this? Should I not do this? Is this the right thing? When I make a painting, there's no thinking, there's no thought. It's an invisible language that only the body
Hmm.
that takes over. So let that language take over. Just do it until it begins
Yeah.
to trust you. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So thank you so much for your time, Shiloh. Do you want to share any parting thoughts? Anything? Oh, tell us about what's some new stuff you're working? What is capturing your imagination now?
Absolutely. So right now I'm making, like I said, a huge installation that responds to motion sensors. So as you walk around it, it lights up with every step of yours. I am making giant brass birds with jeweled hearts that light up, and
Mm.
I'm making, again, with me, I'm seeing institution building as a creative act as well. So with Fearless Foundation growing out, the most exciting thing about that is, I think, as artists, we're also told that we need to live in ivory towers and we need to be separate from the world. And while I literally have an ivory tower in Jaipur and Rajasthan where I can completely isolate myself, we are actually building out an army of artists with Fearless. So right now we have around 200 artists who are a part of our network in India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Uzbekistan, Afghanistan, Myanmar, and Iran.
Mm.
And we hope to grow into around 2,000 artists over the course of the next 2 years. So we're really opening
Yeah,
up our army.
yeah.
And again, I think, the reason why I use the word army, even though it's
Mm.
very loaded, is because I believe that while there are armies of hate and violence, we also need an army of love and beauty. And so that's why we're building out an army of people who
Mhm.
believe in diversity and believe in love. So yeah.
Yeah. Is there a way people can join the Fearless Collective? Because someone is
Yes.
asking
They
how
can
to
just
join,
write to
so
us
maybe you
and
can tell
they
them.
can join in as an artist. Yeah. They can
Yeah.
join the army. Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you so much for your time, Shiloh. I do want to wrap up by saying that it's been an absolute privilege and fun to watch you grow every step of the way. And you've become such a force in the world, and just keep going. I think you traveled to Goa with a little notebook when you were 13, and you did the same thing at 20. You do the same thing at 30. You're a wonderful wanderer. So just keep doing that and bring the art.
Oh,
And
thank you, Lakshmi.
next time probably we'll have your art behind me when
Oh
I
yes, I still owe you a painting. Like
you
20
do.
years later. Yeah.
I just want you to notice the contrast of, I always have like white walls, and then I'm looking at you saying, wow, it looks so beautiful. There's reds and pinks and everything. So you always compensate for everything
Uh,
that's bland
Thank you,
out
Lakshmi. This
there.
has actually been so special, and it's it's
Yeah,
it's Lakshmi, for everybody who's been listening, has been an instrumental part of my story, like I said, and so it's really, really wonderful to share
yeah,
space with someone who has known me basically through all of the
yeah.
different phases, through all of the different avatars. Yeah,
Yeah, it's like, we are all tribe. So, and
yeah,
I mean, it's really a lot of congratulations to not just you, your mom, your brother, just the whole tribe. So
yeah.
with that, have a great time in Jaipur and hope to
Thank
see you
you.
and hope to see your work more.